talking about those parents being on board, which is, the main. Oh, I have a step grandmother in the room. That's fantastic. We can talk about grandparents in a moment, if you wish. But returning to those parents being on the board, in a sense, an obvious question before we begin is, if you talk about someone being on board, is it because in actual fact, a lot of them are overboard when it comes to supporting their children's foreign language learning. And in view of all those different projects that I've been involved in over the years, I think it is fair to say that a lot of the parents do indeed have sort of ambivalent attitudes when it comes to what their role should be. And those attitudes, as I will show you in a moment, very often stem from a number of preconceptions about parental involvement, particularly if a parent is a non-professional when it comes to foreign language learning. And I believe that the first thing, a useful starting point, is to list some of those persistent preconceptions and try and, in a sense, counteract them a little bit, because I think that is what ideally prepares ground for taking parents and bringing them on board when it comes to foreign language learning. Here is the first such preconception. A lot of the parents that I have come in contact with still believe that it's natural, that word, natural, for a child to grow with just one language around. Have you met parents like that? I'm sure you have. Somehow more natural. And this is despite the fact that if you do solid research these days, the world obviously is not just bilingual in the majority, but actually multilingual. So there's nothing natural, and yet people believe that. Another one, kind of, almost like a synonym of that, is that if you do introduce a foreign language too early, then the two languages will somehow end up mixed up, right? Yeah, and Bruno is saying that they don't always see the need, precisely. But in a sense, the reason why is that there are all those preconceptions about. Here is another one. Yeah, better wait with foreign language instruction until the first language has already developed. Okay? Right? Well, I hope not right. Yeah. And Bruno says, well, I mean, of course we are mistaken, but this is not about, in a sense, who is right and who is wrong, but about trying to empathize with the mindset that those parents have got, because unless we make contact with that mindset and are able to show them an alternative, it's difficult to convince anyone. Okay, so that's my opening position. Here is another such preconception. I'm just curious to see whether your experience is similar. Okay, so take a look at this one, equally as good. This one says, only a toddler can ever become truly fluent in, another language, presumably. And did you notice, by the way, that this one is in direct contradiction to the previous one? And yet there are people who, in a sense, simultaneously believe both. And of course, if you like, the crowning one, the one that puts a lot of parents off getting properly involved, is this one. Okay? Unless you are a native speaker of more than one language, then in a sense you have no right to get involved, because you may teach them wrongly and something horrible will happen. They will fossilize with a bad accent and so on and so forth. I take all the hearts that are flashing through the screen to mean that I am making sense. That is, that your experience confirms that this indeed is a situation that we as promoters of parental involvement can easily be confronted with. So what do we say to all of this? Well, I think the best way is to look at wonderful new science. And here is one example of this wonderful new science, a recent postdoctoral dissertation by a colleague of mine, Professor Michał Paradowski, who has this incredibly powerful quote in that dissertation. Do you agree? Take a look. Not only can parents do no wrong, but multilingualism actually is a natural potential. So what is natural is not L1. What is natural is this multilingual potential for every developing human being. Now, even more interestingly, I think, in what Michał says, is that monolinguals, people who only speak one language, are in essence the effect, an unfortunate effect of those environmental factors. What do I mean by that? You know, a combination of what happens at school, at home, you know, where the kid travels, etc., etc. And if the factors are in place early enough, I should add, then everybody can take opportunity to learn another language, or more than one, okay? And of course, there are numerous countries where it is the case, but I think it's great to be able to say, look, we have solid evidence that this is the situation now as we know it. So, you know, this is my starting point. I believe very firmly that, you know, this hat we have got, the hat of a teacher who understands the modern science of bilingualism, multilingualism, early foreign language learning. I'll come back to that, Shabo, that comment about not everybody having a chance. I'll come back to that, I promise. Okay, but you know, if we have that hat, then potentially we can move on and take advantage of of how we can involve those parents properly. Okay, and that's what I mean by onboarding. Okay, onboarding is sort of busting that myth, those preconceptions about inability, being marginalized. You know, at best, perhaps you know, putting the kid in front of a screen to watch movies in the target language. Of course, it's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. However, solid science of foreign language, early foreign language learning these days is unanimous in saying that unless there are real interactions where there's this real use of language, actual acquisition will be impeded. And that's where we need to be alert, so as to speak. Now, how can this be done? I'm not just going to give you those programmatic statements all the time, okay? I have three main things that I would like to offer in way of onboarding those parents. The first is they need to be properly empowered. Sarah just had this wonderful talk about how kids can be empowered at school. And I'm going to, in a sense, extend this and say, and through parents whom we are about to empower, kids can be further empowered back home within the safety and confidence of those domestic interactions. So empowerment is first. Secondly, parents need tools, you know, specific tools, because if they are not given those tools, you know, they may even be on board programmatically, but they will probably, and this is my experience of over 15 years doing these projects, they will probably not move into the implementation stage. And last but not least, and that's where a wonderful teacher like ourselves, I hope, has a fantastic role to play, modeling good behavior. We first model those good behaviors through educational incentives like this one today, and then we hope that parents in turn will model appropriate behaviors in the you know, in the safety of their own home in front of their own kids. Does that make sense to you? So that is, you know, if you like, a three-tier approach to the whole thing, starting with empowerment. We already kind of started with that, haven't we? Where we talked about those preconceptions and the need to bust them, but we can do more than that. And to do more than that, we need to confront head-on one of the most incredibly powerful and lively myths about what it means to actually have another foreign language in one's head. That myth is exemplified by this rather amusing picture. And the myth, the responsibility for that myth goes all the way back to the otherwise wonderful linguist Bloomfield and his publications dating back to the 1930s of last century. Why am I mentioning this now? Well, because you see, he is the one kind of introduced to the public domain the idea that in order for somebody to be properly described as bilingual, and of course by bilingual we mean fully fluent, fully successful in acquiring a foreign language, he or she needs to be native-like. And in other words, the idea was that there is almost like two different characters in one's head, okay? One speaking, say, French, one speaking English, and they are somehow, you know, interacting with one another. Okay, all great. And so unless, you know, this other one is fully grown up, you know, you're not bilingual, okay? Now, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with striving for excellence. However, we have learned since then, you know, there has been great solid science of learning, which tells us conclusively that it's not the case. Because, and this is most important, adding even a little bit of a foreign language to one's L1 just means that your original internal architecture of the brain gets changed. There isn't a separate box for, say, Spanish and a separate box for English. Okay, there's one box, and the box just changes architecture. This is why if you start with a foreign language, you get better at, for instance, concept formation, okay, problem solving, and other wonderful non-linguistic skills, okay, because the architecture of the brain is impacted, okay? This is what parents need to know. Now, if you are a professional, like I'm guessing everybody here, and you want a fancy term for that, I can give you a fancy term. The fancy term is functional plurilingualism, okay? This is how Bloomfield's paradigm has been replaced, okay? However, this is the kind of term for professionals. I'm guessing, unless you have very, very lofty parents in your purview, you will probably not risk telling the parents that actually this is what we are striving for. However, I have also got a wonderful commonsensical translation of what functional plurilingualism means in actual terms. And this is the translation. The translation also comes from a very recent publication, a publication by Hutley, in which she says that an individual actually may be considered to be competent in a language as soon as that person can use the language successfully in a given situation. Now, as you can see, I have highlighted those critical words: use, success, and given situation. Out of those three, I think the last one is most relevant when it comes to empowering parents. Why is this the case? Well, because you see, if you consider what goes on in a typical home between typical parents and typical children, then in a sense, those given situations become very predictable and also very repetitive, something which is wonderful for developing a language habit. In our case, a foreign or a bilingual language habit. Can I give you an example of this? Okay, domestic situations which happen in, I'm guessing, just about every home. Take a look. I'm giving you examples of those situations using Spanish. I did, of course, exactly the same for my own native Polish language, but I was hoping that Spanish perhaps is a bit more accessible to this audience here. Just in case you need help, the first one is 5 more minutes. The second is, shall we play cards? The third is a little juice, please. The one on the right-hand side is, can you take me to school? The next one is, I don't feel sleepy. And the last one, I can't sleep. Yeah, and the last one is, I'd like to watch something on television. I am sure that if you are a parent, you know instantly what sort of situations I am talking about. Are you with me? Okay, those are the situations where a parent, mother, father, grandfather, babysitter, okay, they are confronted with their child, bombarding them constantly with various sorts of needs. Am I making sense? Does that make sense to you? I hope it does, because I am about to say something rather radical now, which is that those needs, apart from being repetitive and predictable, they have one critical, very important feature, which we can use to build a super powerful motivational system for the parents in their home. You know what that feature is? That feature is the property of children's clock. Okay, so if a child says, jugamos a la cartas, shall we play cards? Does the child mean, maybe tomorrow or on Saturday? Have you ever come across a child who says this and has Saturday or next week in mind? I hope not. Okay, because virtually every single child that I have come into contact with has this kind of clock. Do you agree? That's a typical children's clock. Okay? In other words, those needs happen now, right? You say something because you want it now. Correct? Yeah, I can see that you're agreeing. Fantastic. Because you see, the fact that they are now means that as a parent in particular, I have a superpower. What kind of superpower? Well, the power of saying yes, or the power saying, no, enough for today, enough smart, screen time, enough snacks, enough whatever you need to know, okay? Enough. And here comes the clue, and here comes the essence of empowering parents. What if we decided in the safety of a home to share some of that superpower with the children? Okay? Give some of that superpower to our child or children. How would we do that? Well, this is precisely where I turn super serious and say that I am giving part of that superpower to the child because I know what modern science of learning anything, but in particular a foreign language, has got to agree on these days. And to sort of bring this home to you, I have a simple question. If you look at the word learning now, okay, is there another word hidden inside the word learning? Is there? Well, there are several words actually, including, I see some people have noted straight away the word earning. So you cut the word L, cut off the letter L, the universal symbol for learner, and the rest is earning. Coincidence? Well, I don't think so. It's too good to be a coincidence. If you haven't yet noticed that before, I think it's a good moment. Okay, so learning is almost synonymous with earning. Now, of course, by earning, we do not mean transferring money, but we mean the brain of the learner interpreting the situation as such that in the course of that situation, something of value is transferred onto the learner. That's how the brain gets excited. Yeah, that's how the brain gets active. Does it make sense to you? So learning, real learning, true learning is, if you like, synonymous with earning. And now, if we apply this to our domestic, prototypical domestic situation, what kind of tool have we got? Well, the answer is this yields a most powerful, incredible tool. And that tool, da-down, is the target language, okay? In other words, You make a deal as a parent with your children and say, look, from now on, if you want something which you know, and you always know if you're a child, I am not likely to give you, you will have a better chance of achieving it if you ask for it in English or in any other target language that the parent wants to practice with the child. How does that make sense to you? So English, in this case, becomes a super code, okay? You use a little bit of English and you get a little bit of earning, okay? So you will display a bit of learning and in exchange, you get a little bit of earning, all right? And now remember, I'm showing you all of those needs in L1. Greta says, if parents know the foreign language, I don't agree. Greta, I will come back to it at the end if I have time, but if I don't, please ask me again, or Monica perhaps will ask me and I will address this, okay? It's not true. You don't need a fluent parent to do that, okay? What you do need is you need the parent to have the right kind of tool. For instance, a list of ready-made, everyday ready-mades, such as these, okay, which they can help the child gradually use, okay? So as you see, all I did was I translated some of those very obvious everyday children's requests or questions into English. That's all that is. Nothing special. The language itself is quite predictable. It should be. There's no magic. I don't know about this abstract term, Joanna. If you could explain, I will be happy to address this. But in the meantime, I just want to say that, as I keep saying, I have worked with real parents and real children for years and years. Okay, so I know that if you just say to a child, look, I have this little game, you need to ask for extra screen time in English. In order to get it, the child will react by saying, but I don't know how. All of them do, always, initially. Why? Because they are smart and they want to continue to get it the easy way by asking in their mother tongue. And that's where you need to persevere, okay? And that's where modeling good behavior comes in, okay? So here, fasten your seatbelts, because this is what a conscientious, properly empowered parent, empowered by you guys, can do. So imagine now a hypothetical child saying, ¿Puedo jugar con el ordenador? Can I play on the computer? And now a Spanish-speaking father says, ¿Cómo se puede decir eso en inglés? How do you say this in English? And of course, the child, being smart, will say, no sé, I don't know. And this is where the learning comes in, okay? Or the teaching by the parent, okay? The teaching is, can I play on the computer? And again, the child, if they are a normal child, will try to bargain and pretend they can't follow. They say, ¿Cómo? And the parent perseveres and say, can I play on the computer? ¿Puedes repetir? Can you repeat? And the child will go, can I play y después? How was it? On the computer. And now, an important question for you guys. Do you think that at this point, it's taken about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds with a smaller child? Will the child be willing to actually say, can I play on the computer in the target language? Yes or no? Yeah, of course, because they know that the reward, the earning, is just around the corner. Yeah, the screen is waiting. And look, the parent says, yes, you can. You've got 30 minutes. Now, this is the lovely moment, a really lovely moment. In my experience, you can say, you've got 30 minutes. You can also say, no problem, darling. Sure, honey. Go ahead, sweetie. Okay, dear. Whatever. Okay? Whatever you say at this point will always be understood by the child. And why is that? Because it comes together with the reward. This idea of learning as earning. If the brain has been made ready for action, it will understand. Now, at this point, someone might say, well, it's all very well, but what if the time is not right for extra smart time? What do I do now? How can I say no without ruining the whole system? And my answer is, actually, you can say no in your mother tongue. Okay, you don't make the situation any worse for the child. So far, you said yes and no in the mother tongue. Now you reserve the no for the mother tongue, and English, in this case, the target language, becomes the only one in which there is success. So use of the target language becomes associated with success. Now, you might now say, okay, so you gave me one little tool, but how valuable can I play on the computer? And my answer is, well, it's like, this Armstrong landing on the moon. Small step for a man, huge leap for humanity. Because you see, if the brain gets this idea, the little brain gets the idea of one little success yielding reward, they will be ready for another little step and another little reward, okay? Now, how can this be turned into a more coherent, comprehensive system? Well, take, for instance, the can I play, the beginning of this. Can I, of course, is part of a larger collection of predictable phrases which we can gradually give to parents to give to children. Can I play on your mobile phone? Can I watch TV? Yeah, watch a film on DVD or on an app. Can I have some juice, some chicken? Can I have a sausage? You see, so can I is definitely a kind of lexical grammatical pivot which will drive a lot of those predictable interactions, okay? But if you think, okay, is it only going to be about can I? No, there are some others that we have researched, and some of the really popular, useful ones are, I would like, shall we, let's, more, please, okay? It's a small number. If you're thinking, well, shouldn't there be more grammar? My answer is there should be less, but in depth. Less, but totally repetitive. Because the more repetitive it gets, okay, the more it turns into a language habit, okay? If you are thinking, okay, but what about the vocabulary? Well, there is some domestic vocabulary, Some advanced learners don't actually know how you say that, what's the word for that little bicycle with 3 wheels, okay? Or what's the thing that the little baby sucks on, okay? This is domestic vocabulary, almost like English for specific purposes. Here is another lexical field that's really important, okay? Toys. Which toys? Well, that depends on which toys your child happens to have. You will not teach them names for the toys which they don't have. It's pointless. They will never be in a position to ask for these toys or ask to play with these toys. What about clothes? Well, the only clothes that make sense, of course, are the clothes that the kid has got, right? So part of this game is, for instance, asking for a red sweater that you cannot find, yeah? As they always are in a position of in the morning, right? So if you have got a red sweater, you teach red sweater. If you got blue sweater, you teach blue sweater, you see? Okay, and this is my favorite. Can I feed the rabbits? Okay, feed and rabbits. Well, is this useful? Well, it is if you have got the rabbit and you want to feed it. And if you have 2 kids, imagine one kid, the one who says, can I feed the rabbits first, gets to feed the rabbits on a given day, you see? That's the power of giving the right tools to the right people. Of course, in those publications of mine, and in some of those projects that I alluded to, we have worked out complete ready-mades for such parents, like 15 most typical domestic situations for which we give them the typical language for the parent and for the child. That is a great starting point, okay? Another example from a different project, okay, the language of, going to the loo and helping oneself or asking for help if you are 3, 4, 5 and you are in the loo. You can either say it with one word or slightly longer if needed. If you are interested in any of these projects, write me. I'll give you my address at the end. I can tell you more. This is not the time. The final thing that I want to say is that modeling good behavior also means showing the parents that not only do they not need to be completely native, But the fact that they know a little bit of the other language and a lot of the mother tongue is a great advantage, okay? It's an advantage that they can capitalize with because they share the language with that child. And here is evidence. I've translated for you one more time into Spanish English, an original Polish English conversation that took place between a real mother in Poland and a real child. A child approached her with the statement, "Can I have a? Can I have a?" And this mom is my hero, or heroine, I should say, because instead of saying, "Oh, come on, mistake," you know, a noun missing at the end, this mom used the magic power of her own again and said, "Pero, but, can I have ke? What?" So notice this is doing exactly what needs to be done. First, she acknowledges that she understands it's a request, "Can I have that?" But she simply cannot satisfy it because she doesn't know what the child is asking for. And notice the child, same pattern as before, the child says, "Can I have a caramello?" Says sweet, because the child, being a child, obviously just wants to bargain. But mom is smart. Why is she smart? Because instead of saying, "Until you say sweet in English, I'm not gonna cooperate," the mom says, "Ah, yes, I understood." Okay, gives the sweet. The kid says, "Thank you, mom." And now the mom closes it all off and says, "A sweet, un caramello, a sweet." You see? So first you praise and then you teach. This is the kind of methodology we all need, not just parents, teachers as well, but parents instinctively are good at this, praising and teaching. That's how they taught us to walk and eat and all sorts of other things, okay? And you could turn this into a system. For instance, you say, for every single little success, I'm gonna give you a symbol of that, something tangible, like maybe a beautiful stone, yeah, or a button or whatever, yeah, a symbolic success, okay? And then when you collect a certain number of these successes, tokens of success, okay, we can count them in English as well, and we can acknowledge that bigger success by doing something special. Like, for instance, if you have got 50 of them, yeah, which means 50 attempts at saying something in English, wonderful, okay, we can have a night out in a cinema, okay, or an extra, I don't know, going out for ice cream, okay, you name it, it's up to you. This is empowerment. Okay, I hope I made sense to you, because I want to finish by saying that we know about motivation a lot more than we used to. And one of the key things we know now is that small success, when repeated, leads to larger successes. Okay? In other words, those little attempts that the parents will be encouraged to do and promote with their kids will lead to something larger. Of course, the kid, being the kid, will always try to bargain. This is a quote that my son, when he was 6.5, famously had, and I put it into one of my books. The quote is, "When I have all the toys, I won't have to speak English any longer," which I think is brilliant because it tells me that we have hit it on the nail with the child, right? The child does not know that there is no end to those needs, right? But we do. In other words, there is no end to that kind of motivation. And based on that, we can move the kid from the first attempt, you know, like a proverbial Bob the Builder, yes, we can, to someone who, with that same phrase, won presidential elections some time ago. How is that for a perspective of empowering parents? Thank you very much for being with me. I hope it made sense to you. And if so, I'll be very happy to stay in touch. You can either find me via email at my Macmillan address, or you can friend me on Facebook, Grzegorz Spiewak, with a diacritic over S. One of those projects that I talked about is Gadu Gady, and it also has a Facebook page. So do take a look if you would like to be part of that community. Other than that, thank you very much once again. And thank you very much, Macmillan, for making this festival such a tremendous success this year.
Gregorz, this has been an amazing presentation that you have shared with us. Some of the comments, it is interesting. Let me tell you about the comments that the audience has shared.
Please, yes. I promised Greta I would go back to the question of how much language does the parent need to have, but first I will listen to your questions.
Right. Some of the comments, Gregorz, thank you, is about Joanna said it was fabulous. Bruno says it was enticing. Lela said it was interesting. Amal said it was a great job. Medea says it was a great session. Thank you for sharing. And Gregorz, we have two questions from the audience. You have been talking a lot about pricing and about negotiating with students.
Yes.
And here we have, what things would you use as rewards for? Well, you mentioned several of them, but here's an interesting question. How often would you use them, the rewards? You mentioned about the stones and about the tokens of success.
That's a very good question, because what I'm guessing is behind this is this issue of external versus internal motivation, right?
Okay.
And of course, the idea of earning, as I presented it, might be accused of over-focusing external motivation. However, it is my firm belief, based on a lot of interactions with those parents, that, you know, if you are, now imagine, let's be honest about it, if you are a kid aged 4, yeah, in a country like Poland, where everybody around the child speaks Polish, and you can get everything you can through Polish, what point is there in ever opening your mouth in English? And the answer is none. Really, none. Okay. In other words, giving them a system like this is what, you know, people like Bruna years and years ago called scaffolding. I am scaffolding internal motivation. Okay. So what I'm saying is I need to give the child a number of incentives, external incentives, in order for the pleasure accompanying them, okay, taking over and creating in the child a sense of pleasure in opening their mouths in the target language. And I saw this in action, you know, even with my own kids, whom I, you know, exposed to that system. And after a few years, I remember we were on the car together, and at one point, my daughter said something in English, and I said, wonderful, yeah, you know, you deserve an extra point. And she said, you know what? I don't need this anymore. Because it was pleasant, she said. And I thought, wow, you know, but in order for her to feel the pleasure, I need to help. And I think the bit which is often missing in those motivational systems is that internal motivation, of course, is the desired end result, but we need to help it get created. And that's what that system is for, okay? So as with any good scaffolding, I am going to eventually pull it down, okay? But young children in particular need this massively.
Okay, perfect, okay? Amazing. So
my answer is, you know, as often as there is a chance initially, okay? Because if a child attempts something, it's a huge thing, you know, it's a big deal. You know, if he or she speaks a contextually situated bit of English at me, even though he or she knows she could achieve the same thing or just about in Polish.
Right. Okay. So great. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Gregorz.
If I may, now, before we forget, you know, to address this very important question that Greta raised, the question of, does the parent himself or herself need to be fluent? The answer is no. Actually, no. If you give them the right sorts of tools, you know, ready-made lists of those typical phrases, a parent who is actually not fluent at all can learn with the child. And we did an experiment with Spanish, as you can probably guess,
yes,
Spanish in my home a few years ago, well, about 10 years ago, okay, well, my kids were already teenagers, and they knew very well that I spoke no word of Spanish when we began. So in a sense, we exposed ourselves to the very same risk of error, you see, both from the parent and from the child. And you know what? It was the best thing.
Both learned.
Because we both learned. And if there was a word, you know, that, say, someone wanted to use and somebody else did not remember, we could check together. And notice, if you do it like this, then you are teaching the kid a lot of other things as well, such as being honest. Yeah, not pretending, just being honest. Yeah, I don't know, but I know where to check, and I can teach you where to check. These days, it's so easy. We have all those wonderful apps on our mobile phones. You know, there is no problem with access to functional language or to a vocabulary item. That's not the problem. The problem is attitude, the mindset. Okay, because if you are afraid that you're going to make a mistake, you are going to teach your child to be afraid of making mistakes. And that's the closed mindset. Okay, that's why I firmly believe that, you know, to be very safe now, very safe, if a parent can speak A2 English, for instance, they are more than ready to do it right away. Okay, but if they speak less, they can learn. If they so want, they can learn with the child.
Excellent, Gregor. This has been amazing. Let me tell you that one of the comments from, for example, from Ria says that the parents should attend this kind of webinars.
Well, yes, it's a beautiful comment, but you know what? We have historically done such talks to parents. I actually did a talk in Spain a few years ago, where we had a colleague doing simultaneous translation, you know, so it was a proper plurilingual act. But, you know, of course, when I was able to say something like duerme con los angelitos at those Spanish parents, you know, they were all like, wow, so you can speak Spanish. I say, no, but I can say duerme con los angelitos when I put the head on the pillow, you see. And that's where it's needed, okay? I don't need all the other phrases in Spanish instantly, okay? So I'm saying this because if anybody listening to me now, if you would like me to do a talk for your parents, I will be very happy to do this. Let's just organize it, okay? Write me at Macmillan, at my Macmillan address, and, you know, we can think of ways of doing this. These days, technology makes it possible. Okay, but I would love to work with you guys, okay, to perhaps produce bilingual versions of those ready lists for other parents in other countries. It's very easy. You just need to have a template, and then, you know, with ChatGPT and other things, it takes one evening to produce that sort of thing.
Perfect, perfect, Gregor. This has been really amazing. I think we're taking a lot from your session. Thank you very much on behalf of Macmillan, of the Macmillan team, on behalf of our audience. Thank you very much.